What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today I want to do something I don't do very often. I want to look at one of my own decks. Now, I'm not going to do this often. I'm not going to make a video every time I open a new deck. But I believe I might have actually opened a deck which is genuinely over the top good, which has not happened to me yet. And I'm a little bit excited about it. So what I want to do is show it to you, talk it through, and frankly, ask your opinion. Now, I know that SAS rankings are not the be-all and end-all, but the first thing that jumps out to me here is that it has an SAS ranking of 90, and if we look at Age of Ascension, SAS goes up to basically 92, and SAS of 90 puts it on the very, very top end of all of the decks from Age of Ascension. Now, if we look at all of them as a whole, then really Call of the Archons goes up to 95, roughly. So it's not quite so over the top there, but still, ladies and gentlemen, this is still pretty gosh darn good by my reckoning. Now, there are two things that jump out to me as kind of headliners of this deck. And that is that it has both Time Traveler and Help from Future Self. And it has 2 copies of Binding Irons. Now, Time Traveler has long been, pretty much since the beginning of the game, it's been one of the chase cards, so to speak. Although it's really a pair, but they always come as a pair, so let's call it chase cards. In the game, people want to pull a Time Traveler deck. Time Traveler gives you an Amber bonus, and when you play it, you draw 2 cards. Help from Future Self gives you an Amber bonus and grabs a Time Traveler from your deck or your discard pile. Basically, as long as it's not on the field, but Time Traveler has an action which shuffles it into your deck, which you can use the turn you draw into a Help from Future Self. So if your opponent destroys a creature, it's in your discard, play Help from Future Self. If they don't, use the action to put it in your deck, then play Help from Future Self, and that pair of cards basically gets you 2 Amber and 2 cards. That's a good combo. Among the best in the game. And it's also got 2 copies of Binding Irons. Now, Binding Irons is another card which is limited. There are rules, and the rule of Binding Irons is you only get 2 copies in a deck. They are limited to 2 copies in a deck. It just puts free chains on your opponent. You cannot get more than 2. So getting a Time Traveler double Binding Irons deck is good, but that does not in and of itself guarantee some amazing game-breaking deck. What we have here is a lot of cool stuff. Now, one of the weird things I have in the deck, and I'm not sure exactly how I feel about it, and I've done a bunch of research and this does not always happen. I have both Yoke, Old Yoke, and Ancient Yoke. I've got all of the Yokes. Now, Yoke is a 4-power creature. When you play it, you discard a card from your hand. Old Yoke is a 5-power creature. You discard 2 cards. And Ancient Yoke is a 6-power creature, you discard 3 cards. On the one hand, this can be really, really good at discarding cards from your hand that you don't want next turn, so that you can then draw more cards at the end of your turn. And then by the same token, sometimes you don't want to discard the cards and it's kind of annoying. So hey ho. The other thing that jumps out to me about the deck straight away, you don't have any full-on board wipes. There's no unlocked gateway here. But what there is there's quite a lot of ways to get rid of creatures, to get creatures off the field. We know that cards like Sir Marrows are really good at capturing Amber in the new set. This has a few ways around it, and they're largely in shadows. So we've got Lights Out that returns 2 enemy creatures to your opponent's hand. That's quite good. Nerve Blast deals an Amber and does 2 damage to a creature. That's alright. Sucker Punch is an alpha card. Got to be the first thing you do after you forge a key if you're able. Gives you an Amber, does 2 damage, but if you destroy a creature, you archive it. Ready to use it on your next turn. We've got Throwing Stars that deals 1 damage to up to 3 creatures, gaining you an Amber for each creature you destroyed, and Whistling Darts that gives you an Amber and does 1 damage to each of your opponent's creatures. Yeah, that sounds pretty good to me, ladies and gentlemen. No giant board wipes per se, but a fair bit of cheeky damage, though outside of Lights Out, I could see there being a slight issue here in terms of getting rid of stuff with lots of armor. And there's a fair bunch of armor around here and there. Now, if we carry on with shadows for a moment, we need a bit of stealing, and there is a bit of stealing. The stealing here is rather nice. So, we've got, I've already mentioned Nerve Blast. Nerve Blast is quite nice. But we've also got Swindle here. Now, Swindle is one of the new cards from Age of Ascension, and it's the only Alpha and Omega card, and it just steals free amber. It's good. Sees a lot of play. And then we also see Little Niff. Little Niff, after a neighbour of Little Niff is used to fight, you get to steal an amber. That sounds kind of fun. I could be on board with that. And then we've got Ronnie Wrist Clocks, who steals 1 amber, but if your opponent's got 7 or more, you get to steal 2. Incidentally, there is also a copy of Cutthroat Research here, which I'm not a huge fan of. Cutthroat Research gains you an amber and steals 2 if your opponent has 8 or more. The issue with Cutthroat Research is that you're still leaving them with enough amber to forge a key. And, I essentially then have to rely on my lone copy of Helperbot, which I love, to then use a card from Shadows to go and steal the last little bit. It's not a perfect situation here. Now, the last few Shadows cards here, we got Dust Chronicles, gains me an amber, and well, if your opponent has more amber than you, draw a card. If you've got more than them, you archive a card. Very important. If you've got the same number of amber, it does nothing. Don't be silly and make that mistake, ladies and gentlemen. You will regret it. There's then 1 copy of Bullet Eye that when you reap, you get to destroy a flank creature. And a copy of Deep Nose Spy Master. Now, I kind of like this. It's got an Omni ability where you can choose a friendly creature and use them this turn. So essentially, no matter which house you've got, Deep Nose Spy Master lets you use any creature from any of the other 2 houses. So on a Logos turn, I can use a Dis or a Shadows creature as long as I've got Deep No on the field. But it's a 1 power creature. Even with Elusive, it ain't going to last very long. If you can make it stick though, it's awesome. And then finally 1 Bone Rot Venom. That's one of these new upgrades you're supposed to put on your opponent's creatures. Gains me an amber and does 2 damage to them after the creature is used. Sounds good to me. Moving into Dis, one of the cards I adore here is Creeping Oblivion. Creeping Oblivion gives you an amber bonus and lets you purge up to 2 cards from a discard pile. Basically here, you just get to purge a couple of cards that you don't want your opponent reusing. It's not going to work in every matchup, because not every matchup sees your opponent cycling through their deck constantly or being able to recover cards, but where they can, this is pretty gosh darn good. We've got Exhume here, gives you an amber bonus and lets you play a creature in your discard pile as if it belonged to the active house and was in your hand. And I've already mentioned that Helperbot is in this deck, and we saw this at the Vault Tour in Birmingham. There is the great combo of Exhume to get yourself a Helperbot to let you play either a Logos card or a Shadows card out of turn. Gives you a little bit of house cheating along with Deep No Spy Master, which makes me rather happy. Not Finished With You lets you just recover all of your creatures. Best use for this really is waiting till you're quite close to being able to shuffle your discard pile and make it back into your deck. Does give you an amber bonus, incidentally. And then shuffling back just a couple of creatures you really want, so you're going to draw into them nice and quickly. We've got a Bloodshard Imp. Now, I'm not a huge fan of this one. After a creature reaps, its controller must sacrifice it. Now, this could be amazing, but it could also backfire rather spectacularly. You've got to be really careful with this. There's a copy of Spider, which I'm not a huge fan of. 2-power creature with Skirmish. If you're attacking a flank creature, you've got Poison, which basically means you can destroy any flank creature, because Poison means if you do any damage, you will destroy it. So that's kind of nice. I suppose if they've got fewer than 2 armor, the armor could save them here, unfortunately. And then there's a copy of Charette. Charette is brilliant. Charette lets you capture free amber. It is a great anti-reaping card. And before we finish, I should quickly mention there is a copy of Library of the Damned here. Just lets you archive a card. But it's an action, so you can do it or not do it. And you can build up a nice archive to use later and have a nuts turn. It's cool. And look, I'm not loving the logo suite here because, well, Cutthroat Research isn't amazing. But I am loving that we've got Charette, which can really help you out. And you've got both Exhume and Helperbot to try and house cheat into other creatures. And then we've got some Stealing in Shadows. I don't think this is the best Stop You Reaping deck ever. But you've got a bunch of options and that makes me happy. Now, finishing off with logos, we mentioned some of the cards. There's a copy of Poke. Gains you an amber. Deals 1 damage to an enemy creature. If you destroy them, you get to draw a card. It's not phenomenal, but amber and damage, I'm down with it. Now, standardized testing can be a game-breaking card. I've mentioned how I don't have any board wipes in this deck, and that's largely true, except standardized testing could be. It destroys each creature with the lowest power and each creature with the highest power. So if there's 4 creatures with 5 power and 7 creatures with 2, but none above or below that, they would all get destroyed here. It can be a phenomenal board wipe, but it is rather situational. There is a copy of Memory Chip. After you choose logos as your active house, archive a card. And that can be brilliant. And there is a fair bit of archiving in this deck, incidentally. I've mentioned Sucker Punch, which is quite good. We've got the Memory Chip that I've just mentioned here. We've got Library of the Damned that just lets you archive a card. You can build yourself up a really nice archive using this deck. And then have a really nuts turn if you've been archiving correctly, and that will work quite nicely. The other archiving card we've got here is ZYX Researcher, but that archives the top card of your deck or discard pile, which means you do run the risk of going and archiving a card that is of a different house to the rest of your archive and essentially clogging up your hand. But make no mistake about it, decks that can archive effectively have a huge advantage because you get that turn where you're playing 9 or 10 cards from the same house, and those turns can be absolutely devastating for your opponent. Setting up a battle line that they cannot contend with, or just gaining a whole bunch of amber. We got 2 copies of Archimedes, speaking of archiving here. It's got elusive and each of its neighbours gain destroyed. Archive this creature. Yeah, don't worry, I am aware of the Archimedes controversy. I'm putting all my thoughts together into a little script. We'll be getting a video about that probably tomorrow. It's on my list, ladies and gentlemen. Don't you worry. There's then 1 copy of Igor. When you play it, look at the top 3 cards of your deck, put 1 in your hand, discard the others. There's very little big draw and big search in Keyforge. This can help you dig for that card you need. This is the one that can help you get that Helperbot, or if you've got Helperbot, the card you really want to play with Helperbot. And then finally, 1 copy of Pip Pip. After an enemy creature reaps, stun it. Great card that I absolutely adore, but it's a 2-power creature without elusive. Frankly, your opponent is not going to respect that when it's out on the field. Pip Pip ain't lasting long. I've got some decks I like from Keyforge, but this is the first time I've opened up a deck and gone, ooh, that's nice. I do have a deck which has an 87 SAS from Call of the Archons, which is fine, but has not really blown me away, either on paper or in testing. I've not been able to take this out to any tournaments yet, and the Crucible's not been updated with Age of Ascension, but the little bit of testing I've been able to do at home with friends and the wife, etc., the early returns on this deck are good. I think I might finally have opened a deck which is awesome. Why bother making a video about it? Partly because I want to hear your thoughts. I want to tell you about it. And also, I wanted to just analyze the deck to show you the kind of things to look for when you're opening a deck. What's there? I'll give you one last nugget about my deck. No artifact control. There is nothing in this deck whatsoever that can take out or get rid of artifacts. So if my opponent's got a really good artifact game going on, they're golden. If they've got an Nepenthe Seed down, they can wait as long as they want. I ain't getting rid of it for them. That is one of the very few downsides of the deck. So now, ladies and gentlemen, I do want your help. I want to know, is this deck as good as it looks? Tell me your thoughts in the comment section. I'd love to hear them. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and follow me on Twitter at the Wossy, where we talk about Keyforge and a whole bunch of other games. But don't worry, I'm not going to show you all of my decks. They're not the general kind of videos we tend to do here. But come on, I've got to, haven't I, ladies and gentlemen? I've just got to. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wossy Plays.